Big gal is here and it is not falling over because
Look at this salesman go.
the miracle of modern science gives us bipods. But the big question is, and maybe we've asked this question as we got into precision rifle shooting years ago, why is this rather, worth 7 of these?
8 of those.
8 of these.
Guys, I'm Josh, this is Henry, and we're with 9 Horror Views, and today we're talking bipods. When I think bipods, for a very long time, I thought very one-dimensionally about bipod use, and it was like, I'm prone, I use the bipod to stabilize the front end of the gun, and that's what I use it for. And when you think about it within that context, I'm prone on nice, flat, stable ground.
Right.
And then when you think about it in that context, a $40 or $50 bipod seems like perfectly reasonable. And it is perfectly reasonable. But when you start expanding past just shooting in prone and wanting to do a bunch of other elements and pieces with the bipod, that's where I found that some of this stuff starts to show itself as to why one brand or another might be a preferable choice. And in fact, of the different options that we have on the table, each of them kind of excels in its own way.
I grew up in a very dense city, the densest city in the world, Hong Kong. For the longest time, I didn't understand why people would ever buy a pickup truck. Why would you purchase a vehicle that has less cab space for people, right? And if you don't want people, you can buy a van and put things in the back. Then I moved to Texas, and I realized that pickup trucks are really, really nice. But that's the change of environment.
Why don't we just show a quick demo of what we have on the table, and we'll talk about some of the places where you might be using bipods, not just in the prone, or not just in the prone on a nice flat style range.
Okay.
So the first one, you already showed this one off.
The Magpul. It's a very consumer-friendly price, but as Magpul usually does with PMags, with any other products, they balance function and cost. And this is one of those options that is exceedingly popular because of its price tag.
And it does have like quite good functionality for probably the price point.
Right.
And because again, there are options below this, the $40, $50 options. I've used them at one point or another.
Sure, yeah.
And again, they work generally fine. But yeah, so you've got the Magpul.
Well, one thing about the Magpul that even though you could say it's like on the more budget side, it does have a tensioning screw. And I found that having good tension on bipods to where it's not just completely floppy has been very, very useful to stabilizing rifles. So I shoot a lot of Harris bipods. It also has tensioning screws in the back, but you'll see that a lot of the Harris bipods that I run, I actually put pod locks on them.
Yeah, the pod lock. This lever right here, the same type of lever that's on the Atlas ones as well.
Right. And so that lets you adjust the tension, and what that means is, now I just loosened it. You see it's flopping all over the place, right?
Yeah, you have a bunch of tilt available.
While this is easy to conform to different terrain, it's also not very stable when you're shooting off of it. I would actually, if I had an option that this is the only tension that I have, I would rather shoot off of a pack. But the cool thing about using pod locks on Harris bipods is then you could give it a little bit more tension, still have it conform to the ground, but then at the same time, once you conform to the ground, it's fairly stable.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about Harris, and Josh has his nice little field modification right here. The cool thing about these Harris bipods, you could field mod it to deploy it very, very, very quickly. So you'll see Harris bipods are quite popular with military, law enforcement, because
this QD, quick deploy.
Yeah.
The Magpul ones are the same way. Like they're quick deploy as well, insofar as they don't have, there's no like lock when it's in the closed position, so you can theoretically come in and swipe it down. Yeah. When I shot this in 3-gun, I put a premium on that because I wanted to be able to come in and sort of just sweep open a bipod and not be sitting there like fiddling with trying to open it on the clock.
Magpuls do lock open though.
Yeah.
Whereas the Harris, once if you're on a 3-gun situation, you're finished shooting, you're moving again. So you don't have a lock open function, but that's
tons of tension to keep them in the open position.
Right. So
Interestingly, though, and this is where we start to pivot into some of the other options, some people might consider that as a negative.
Correct.
So that carries us over then into the wide range of Atlas bipods, because there are a whole bunch of them. And to be fair, there's a bunch of different Harris models as well.
Right. So this is the base model Atlas with not so base model
Just
feet.
upgraded feet.
These are the base model feet. Now, you'll see that these are two different widths, and when they fold out, they most certainly fold into different widths as well. So you'll see Atlas bipods, they lock out. It's really nice. You can still pull them out, and everything completely locks out in a lockout function. That gives you a very, very stable platform. You also have a tensioning screw on the bottom. Again, that gives you the stability during pan if you want to pan or tilt your particular bipod. One thing that you can do with the Atlases that you can't do with the Harris or the Magpuls, you can pull them backwards, and actually if you had a ledge right here, you can hook the legs in front of the ledge and actually do a little pulling motion and get a little bit of the barricade assist.
Well, and certainly even if you had them in the straight configuration, it's something that the Harris can't necessarily do because the legs will fold if you pull against them.
Right.
So again, a reason why some people might not like the automatic folding legs on the Harris. You mentioned the panning feature of the Atlas, which again the Magpul also does have, the Harris does not. While the pan seems cool in concept, I actually really don't like it.
I don't use it very often.
I find that even with the screw tightened all the way down, if I'm like loaded into a gun shooting like aggressively, I tend to get it off kilter at one point or another in that sequence or the string, and then to try to realign it with the parallel to the bore is very time consuming and like cumbersome.
I've seen some of that, although I tighten my tensioning screw down pretty hard, especially when I'm shooting something like a Magnum. I try to get as stable of a base as possible. And so could I run a Harris on a 338?
Sure.
You could. That's not an issue. But of the two, having the lockout function of the Atlas, especially something like this or what you see right here that has a wider footprint, that gives me even more stability when I'm running something that has a little bit more recoil.
Just as a point of reference, right? Like one of the things that I've done is, because I do like the relative stability of these Atlas setups, like when they're in the lock position, they're like really solid. But I don't like the pan, is I found that this version, where it eliminates the pan, maintains the tilt with the pod lock, but eliminates the pan, I actually prefer. It's a bit of a wider footprint, right? You have a little bit more mass in terms of width and everything else, but it's pretty minimal, right? It's pretty minimal in terms of that, and I really like the gains that I'm picking up there.
So what I've seen is in the last couple of years, as guys are competing in PRS, they've really, I think the PRS game has really made the Atlas bipod very, very popular because of its versatility and being able to lock out and then extend, and there are ones that go even way farther than this. And some of those have actually been very beneficial to those guys. And to Josh's point, though, I think this particular model has been quite popular with the PRS guys.
Or similar, or ones like this from other manufacturers. There are some similar footprints. I think Thunder Beast has one that's like kind of like this, and MDT has, I think their ground pod is more akin to this one. But speaking of MDT,
yes, let's look at the Cadillac of bipods that we have right here. So Josh's bipod right here, in cursory view, you may say, oh, this does the exact same as the Atlas, but does it? It absolutely does not. But, oh wait, this even goes farther out. So if you're in such an extreme scenario where you are shooting and all you have in front of you is a tire, you can rest this on the tire, the spikes will nicely jab into that tire.
it's just ridiculous.
It is, but
Please retract my wings.
in that particular scenario, something like this could be very advantageous. Now, the big question is, are you in that scenario a lot?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing something that warrants that? Now, if you shoot a lot of PRS, the answer is probably yes.
Well, and I think that that's a great point, right? Because in the different competitive games out there, you're frequently put in extremely challenging scenarios over what might be normal.
Right.
And it's done obviously to challenge skill set. And the result of that then is, well, we build and we push the limits on the equipment to help compensate for those extreme scenarios. But whether or not those extreme scenarios are likely going to be encountered where you need said equipment off that game or outside of that game, that's a question you have to really think hard about.
Now, for some of the audience out there, you may be someone who who has a requirement to flex on the gram. For those guys, yes. But let's be real, as Josh is saying. Be honest with yourself. What are you using your firearm for? If you're a hunter, and every now and then you're going in and out of a tree stand, to be honest, maybe a good rest and practicing on that rest would be just as effective.
In one other area, Henry, that, sort of as we think through bipod application and things that are relevant, whether it's quick deploy or being able to have rearward facing legs that lock, or whether or not legs lock at all, whether we can stow the bipod with legs in as opposed to only legs forward.
Like this.
Absolutely, whereas that's simply not possible for something like the Harris, and it has to be run with legs forward. When we're looking at things like this, one of the areas of consideration is also shooting in and off of awkward positions, like barricades and braces. And different configurations of these do, let's call them differently, some better, some worse, in different, in different setups. When I look at the MDT, for example, it actually has an entire built-in surface designed to be used to hook over the barricade, much like you were hooking the legs on your Atlas, and pulled against. And things like that are pieces where, we think about that conceptually. It's something we built into how we designed the slate stop even, to be used off of a barricade. But it's basically integrating that type of technique into the bipod configurations.
Yeah, and to that note, locking bipods, and sometimes Harris bipods and other bipods as well, having a consideration on how you could load the bipod is also important. Loading the bipod meaning putting tension on the bipod, and that tension decreases the amount of wobble you get in your reticle as you're trying to acquire a good shot downrange.
So ultimately, there's a value proposition whenever you're buying a commercial product. And if the value proposition isn't there for you, because again, you're being honest, as you say, you're being honest with yourself about the use case, then don't spend the money on the item that doesn't make sense. Like,
put it back in my scenario. If I were living in a big city, do you need a sedan more, or do you need a Cybertruck? You need a Cybertruck. Do you need that function? Or in some cases, do you even need
the car at all?
Right.
Great point. Before we wrap, Henry, one other piece I want to talk about is attachment method. Is here in front of you, we've got Picatinny, QD, Arca, QD, and then even like this one on the Magpul. I have this set up to be able, it's on a kinetic development little QD M-lock panel, to be able to pop in and pop the entire thing off.
Now what Josh doesn't have, however, and I have plenty of, are the Harris bipods that hook into your sling swivels.
Yes, yes. I actually have one of those on my Remington 700.
Okay.
But the attachment methods are important and worth consideration, not just being able to lock them in and take them off, like whether you want it QD or not, but also whether or not you want to be able to adjust your position forward and back on the rail system, depending again on what you're doing with the particular rifle. So if you need those capabilities, there are systems out there that exist, whether it's Arca or like Arasaka has a Picatinny system that slides in and out. Whatever it is, those are considerations you should have when you're going out to potentially pick up a bipod.
So if you, in this particular case, you can see that there is a conversion piece right here. the Picatinny is converted into an M-LOK QD attachment method. Now, this makes it exceedingly versatile to drop between different rifles. However, it also increases the height, which then could decrease some of the stability. But that is also a huge, just a consideration. Do you need the bipod? How do you want the attachment to go?
Well, and a great point there, Henry, that's worth addressing. There's some geometry here.
Yeah,
right?
so
there's some geometry that's happening.
Let's look at these two particular things. The Atlas, you can see, covers more ground because it's a little wider, and the apex is right here on the barrel, whereas the apex for this particular one is right underneath a rifle. That makes it a lot less stable, although it's faster to pan and tilt if you really needed to. It's less stable. So from a precision rifle perspective, that may not be the ideal thing. On an extreme case, with the MDT, you could bank your bipod all the way out, and I'm going to do this again, and get in a very extreme apex on this particular thing. But then you're talking about, are your bipod legs going to have excessive flex to it? So your bipod construction that way also matters as well. Are you looking at a budget constraint? Are you looking at a use case constraint? Or are you looking at an attachment constraint? Or are you looking at a weight constraint? You may not want to take a heavy bipod into hunting long hikes. So all of these ought to be considerations that you put upon yourself before you go out and purchase a set of bipods for your use.
Guys, as always, thanks for hanging out. Until next time, we'll see you on the range.
716, this is Steel Knight 6, 4 Vic, 8 packs, Redcon 1, green to green, how copy, over?
Steel Knight 6, this is 716, roger, over. 16, Steel Knight 1, 1 pack, green, green, over. This is 716, roger, over.
16, Steel Knight 2, 1 Victor, 2 packs, Redcon 1, over.